Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Round Robin. I am your host, Tracy Preston. Along with me is Christine Mulligan, Nina Mulligan, Regina Lindsay, Angela Sinclair, and of course, my husband, Todd Preston. Hey, everyone.
Hey. Hello. Hello. Hi.
Waka waka waka.
I still, the one that still gets me the best is the hello. I think that's Nina, and I love it. All right. So on today's Round Robin episode, we are going to be discussing the Oxford High School shooting. Now, I found an article on NPR.org called School Shooter. Understanding their path to violence is key to prevention. And that was written by Ritu Chatterjee. Now, this article contains views from psychologist John Van Driel, and he said, quote, "Someone went out of their way to target and kill children who look like our children, teachers who look like our teachers, and did it for no other reason than to hurt them. And that's very personal." Van Driel is the Director of Safety and Risk Management at Salem-Keizer Public Schools in Oregon. He and many other psychologists spend a lot of time thinking about what it's like to be one of these school shooters. And here's why. Understanding who these shooters are is the key to prevention. Reed Malloy, who is a forensic psychologist and has consulted with the FBI, says, quote, "Adolescent school shooters, there's no question that they're struggling and that there have been multiple failures in their lives. Many of them are struggling with psychological problems." He went on to say, "We know that mental health issues are very much in the mix. The child might be just very depressed. We also found in one of our early studies that you've got this curious combination of both depression and paranoia." The article also went on to say that whether or not they've been diagnosed or whether or not they're severely mentally ill, something is going on that could have been addressed through some kind of treatment, but most never do. Now, those studies were conducted by the FBI and the U.S. Secret Service, and they also found that many of the shooters were feeling desperate before the event. Van Driel emphasizes that mental health issues do not cause school shootings. He stated that only a tiny, tiny percentage of kids with psychological issues even go on to become a school shooter. He does say that mental health problems are a risk factor because they can decrease one's ability to cope with other stressors. And studies show that most school shooters have led particularly stressful lives. The article goes on to say that many, though not all of the perpetrators have experienced childhood traumas, such as physical or emotional abuse, and unstable families with violent, absent, or alcoholic parents or siblings, and most have experienced significant loss. Also, feeling like an outcast at school and being bullied can certainly play a part. And that all came from a 2004 study by the U.S. Secret Service and the U.S. Department of Education, where they found that 3/4 of the school shooters have been bullied or harassed at school. And lastly, the article says that time and time again, psychologists and educators have found that surrounding a young person with the right kind of support and supervision early on can turn most away from violence. Connecting with students, listening to them and supporting them, getting them the help they need can prevent future attacks and make schools a safer place for all children. So, my amazing friends in the nest, what are your thoughts?
Honestly, just wondering how much money they spent on these studies to tell us what's blatantly obvious to most of us. I mean, I appreciate the fact that they researched it, okay? Don't get me wrong. But just based on general life experience as an adult, I would think that it's kind of obvious what the pattern is after so many of these school shootings. It hasn't been the captain of the football team, and it hasn't been the head cheerleader. It hasn't been the homecoming queen. It's been loners, isolated, bullied. It seems to me to be obvious, and I don't understand. It kind of just goes back to what Tracy's always saying. We should do mental health counseling and education in the school.
Amen. And if we keep preaching that, we're going to get it.
Before we jump on Tracy's bandwagon where there's no money to ever do that, I say partially in jest just to jab at Tracy. The thing is, yes, I agree with Regina. It's the outcast kid that normally does this. But what that study is showing, and we talked about another study a couple of podcasts ago about how they basically said kids that have no regard for human life are the ones that aren't regarded for at home. So if their life is not regarded for, they lack regard for other people's lives. So essentially is human beings will do how they're treated. They will treat others how they are treated with disregard or abandonment or being the outcast. They will then cast others out.
Agreed. And in this particular episode that we did about Ethan Crumley, I don't want to give him too much notoriety at all. But, his mother was an alcoholic. His father was an alcoholic. He was left alone all the time from the time he was just a little guy. And all he really had, it sounds like he had a couple of friends, but other than that, he had a ferret and a dog. Those were his constants, I guess. And when he lost, I think it was his dog died. That really kind of broke this kid.
I think this goes even a step further because we're not talking about just anybody. We're talking about boys. Like, plain and simple. This is not a girl problem. So clearly girls who are neglected and who have alcoholic parents are not the ones picking up guns, shooting schools. So if this is a boy problem, we go, why is this a boy problem? Well, this is a boy problem because of patriarchy. Because when you don't fit into the box of societal masculinity, then you create young adult boys who can't ever express themselves and don't understand how to express their feelings other than through anger or silence. And the ones who get angry, they go around being the bullies. And the ones who stay silent end up being the ones that shoot up the schools.
You know what, Nina? I'm so happy that you brought that point up because it's very true. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I think I heard of one girl shooting in a school. There was something with a female that was shooting, which was very odd because you're right, it is all boys. And that's a problem that we need to...
Well, that is part of the patriarchy society that we live in, is because we've conditioned women, not so much girls in the younger age now, because we've come some way, not a long way, but we've come some way. So girls growing up now, the younger generation, those girls are a little bit more free to express themselves in some ways. But boys, we're still very much steeping them in be masculine. Maybe not as much with the very recent generation that's coming up. We're letting them be who they want to be in whatever fashion they want to be it. But for the majority of society, men still have to be men, men. And what it is to be a man, I really can't even tell you because it's so damn blurry nowadays.
Maybe Todd has some insight since he's a man. How do you feel? How does society make you feel? You have to be, or what you have to do to be a man.
Let's go with the man's point, hon. Go.
I don't really conform to society. I know I'm a man. I don't have to worry about nothing.
Am I a man? I'm kidding, Todd. I love you.
I just wanted to share. Here's the statistics. Since 1982, there's been 145 male school shooters. There's been 4 female shooters. And there's been 2 male and female combo shooters.
Really?
Yep.
Male, female, where was that?
I don't know. It's just giving me the stats, baby.
Oh.
Well, Bonnie and Clyde, for one.
Well, that was before 1982, though.
That's true.
I I know. I was kidding. That was the only duo I could think of.
Yeah.
And plus, I had that one that we talked about, but that was also in like the 1920s. We did a podcast on a couple where the woman jumped into his scene and started malicing
Yeah.
people.
Yeah, Raymond Fernandez and Martha Beck. That's who that was. That was in the 1940s. Yeah. So, I mean, hun, back to the question. You came from a family of 5 siblings, 1 sister, the rest boys. All were football guys, and you guys are men's men, like from that perspective as how men are or how boys are supposed to be. Like I don't know. I doubt your father ever kind of put that thing on you, but still.
No,
What are your
I don't
thoughts?
think he really put that on us. And also, we'd never had guns in the house. We had BB guns. But, of course, all 4 of us boys ended up joining the military and ended up with guns anyways. But I don't know. I think between my brothers and I, we made each other men, you know. We had issues. We would duke it out, and then that would be the end of it.
Right, and all of you guys were pretty popular guys in high school,
Yeah.
right? So it wasn't like anybody was really pushing you guys around or bullying you guys. You guys all had good friend groups.
Except for first grade when I first moved to Charlotte.
Yeah, you got bullied a little
I
bit.
got bullied as being the new kid, you know, and I eventually snapped and bitch slapped this dude in the cafeteria, and then I got sent to the naughty wall. And I'm sitting there at the naughty wall crying.
So what stands out to me about this, though, is what you said about you and your brothers sort of made each other men. It's like if you had a disagreement, you duke it out. And there you go. I mean, it is socially acceptable and expected for men, young men and boys, to be physically violent when they're angry. No one ever encourages their daughter to just go punch their sister in the nose because he's upset or because somebody took her doll or her Legos or whatever her favorite toy is. You know, girls are not encouraged to be physically aggressive, and it's not excused when we are.
That's very true, and we've talked about that before.
We were certainly encouraged not to fight in the house. I know that.
Take it outside,
Yep.
boys.
Got to go outside.
Yeah, but like at society at large, though, that's the at large thing. Because I'm not the same. I grew up with 2 older brothers, and they were very, very large. And by Todd's delineation, that's what made me a man. So it's my brother's fault I'm a raging lesbian. But I digress. I mean, I grew up in the city, so I mean, fighting was a thing, and the aggression and everything, it was a thing. But it was a cultural thing because of where I grew up and the time frame and all of that. But society didn't deem that correct. You know, didn't deem that was acceptable. Society at large had no qualms about letting girls like me know that we were too manly, so to speak. And what that really means is it's not so much how exactly any of us were directly brought up or reared, but society at large says being manly is to take care of the women around you. And being manly is to be able to stick up for yourself. And being manly is to be able to defend yourself. And being manly is all these powerful things. But not all men are powerful. Do you know what I mean? Not all men can do that, especially young boys that are becoming men that are dogged at every corner. You know what I mean? They're neglected or abused at home, and then they're shunned or bullied at school. And society is telling them, be a man, stand up for yourself. Be a man, take charge. Be a man, make it what you want it to be. Take the bull by the horns. Grab life by its balls. All those cliche things. I didn't say anything that none of us never heard before, and everything that I said was fucking ridiculous.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. It's very true. And all of these, you know, at least the ones that I've seen that are the school shooters, they're just kind of mealy kids. Like they haven't really blossomed yet. And so the only way for them to have power and to show everybody else is is through a gun. I'll show you.
Yeah, I agree. And I just really, something just hit me as you were saying that, how you're always like, oh, we need mental health counselors in schools and everything. The thing about even, and that's why, I'm sorry, I digress. And that's why the article stated that mental illness wasn't really par for the course in shooter, because the mental illness that we're assimilating to these people about being neglected and abused and all that, ironically, it's not actually considered mentally ill for a young man to want to be, quote unquote, a man. So therefore, it doesn't even fit the mental illness bill.
Right.
How crazy is that?
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, so it's not a, diagnosed mental illness, but when you have no foundation at home, right? You feel like you have nothing, like no one loves you, and you just have a tiny little, maybe a friend or two friends, and you're getting picked on at school. So now it's like I'm getting shit at home. I certainly don't feel loved here. And then I'm at school, and then I've got the jocks picking on me, or whoever else,
Right,
because
there's
I'm
no
on the
respite.
fringe. Right.
But we're also not considering the fact that in order to be diagnosed with a mental illness, you have to have been taken somewhere for treatment and diagnosis. And depression and anxiety are diagnosable mental illnesses.
Mm-hmm.
But these children haven't seen anyone to make the diagnosis, to make the assessment. So, yeah, statistically, they don't, school shooters don't have a diagnosed history of mental illness, because none of them, if they ever get mental health care at all, don't get it until after the fact when they're in jail.
Right. But as far as these articles that do the research on the correlation between mental illness and the shooters, they're doing it after the fact. They're analyzing them. They're analyzing their lives if they don't survive, but most of them, unfortunately, do survive. And I know that's a horrible thing that I just said, unfortunately, about a child at all, but it's a very tangled web when somebody goes and shoots up other people to want to then salvage their life. I don't know. It's a spider web that I'm not even really going to go with, but it is what it is. They analyze them after the fact because they do usually survive, and they do usually have them in counseling and all of that. And even afterwards, and even after they recount what they did, they still can't diagnose them with mental illness 90% of the time, I think is what one of the articles mentioned. 90% of the time, there's no mental illness within these people that do these crimes, which I find bonkers.
So what would you consider depression then? Is that not a mental illness, or is it just a symptom?
It is a mental illness. It could be a mental illness.
Right.
So if they were
diagnosed depression.
So if they were depressed after the fact, you'd have to assume they were depressed before, no?
Right, but the weird thing is apparently they're not. At least that's what the research is saying.
That's crazy.
Right, but how can you say that after the fact when you and I both know that depression, anxiety, those types of mental illness, the symptoms wax and wane over a period of time. So there's no way to tell what their state of mind was at the time that these crimes took place. And I really don't think that anybody who is not having some kind of a dissociative state where depression, anxiety, whatever, turns to blind rage and you just go in and kill people. I mean, I don't think they woke up in their right mind, even if it's temporary insanity. If you can plead temporary insanity in a heat of the moment murder, who's to say that they didn't have these underlying conditions and then one day enough was just enough?
Yeah, but I just was watching something the other day, and we're always talking about head trauma and how that causes people to become violent and stuff like that. So they were saying that if you have an incredibly emotionally traumatic thing, that your brain can actually bruise itself and actually concuss from, they're finding research now that it has the same effects as being concussed by hitting your head or being hit in the head. And that's just through the act of being emotionally traumatized. So maybe if you are emotionally traumatized as a kid, and that's like getting hit in the head playing, football or something like that, maybe you could become violent as you grow up.
I find that extremely interesting because in my brain, I'm like, is there some kind of stress response that's causing a vessel to, a cerebral artery to leak, to bleed, to weep? What, right? What else would cause the bruising? I find that extremely interesting.
Excessive pressure in the head would definitely cause vessels to weep.
Yeah.
And cause bruising. I mean, third spacing is a thing.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this before with concussions possibly being a cause for violent behavior, So who knows? I mean, this kid, if he was bullied, maybe got pummeled a few times and it went unchecked.
He could have. And also to remember his mother was an alcoholic. He has fetal alcohol syndrome. So he's got issues with coping, for sure. Plus, on top of that, he's living in a home where his parents could give a hell. Mm-hmm. They got to go out to the bar and party. See ya. Eat that frozen burrito. You're good. Bye. So what about you, Angela? What do you think? What are some of your thoughts on how we're tearing this kid apart? I'm actually going to read what Angela had said. She had a really bad connection, and I want what she said to be heard. So this is what Angela was saying. I agree with all of it, actually. It makes sense. And there's so many people out there right now who are worried about mental health. I'm a gamer, and in the chats of one of the games I like to play, there was a guy who made a comment in the chat that he had to go to the school to talk to the teachers and to the principal about his son, and it led to a discussion on being bullied and nothing being done, and how all that can lead to school shootings. It was kind of interesting how several people were all in agreement in the chat, and how mental health is a big deal, and how a lot of kids are growing up in homes that are broken and damaged, and then the kids have to go to school and deal with all of the bullying there. It's not an excuse whatsoever, but it is a snowball effect. Most people have a conscience. Most people know right from wrong. Society teaches us that through all cultures. And I have to say that after reading this kid's journal pages and deciphering them, he knew right from wrong. He knew that if he wasn't stopped, he would be a serial killer. That's what he stated. He knew right from wrong, even though his parents were not the best role models. Yeah, and I found it interesting in his, some of the little snippets that he was writing about that he needed to do this, and if he didn't, he was going to have a sad life. So it's very interesting to me how in his mind that maybe the notoriety, being in the news, being in the newspapers, being talked about everywhere, maybe that was enough for him to feel his power and feel that he's on top of the world instead of just
right. It was definitely a power thing.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yep. I
mean, obviously he felt powerless in his own life.
Yeah, agreed.
And I'm quite sure that, in other cases that is also the case. Maybe not 100%, but at least part of it, I feel.
I definitely agree. And
I think sometimes it's any attention, it doesn't matter if it's good attention or bad attention. They just need the attention and the notoriety. I mean, that's kind of the purpose of it because, like we also discussed before, for decades, people remember these shooters' names, but not necessarily anything about any of the victims per se.
And, I had a thought, too, that, let's just take the situation where this kid or that kid is getting bullied. I find it interesting that they don't target the bully. It's just rando. You know what I'm saying? Like, if I'm to that point where I'm like, I'm going to shoot everybody. I'm going to go into this school and I'm just going to shoot people. To me, if it was going to be me, I would target the people who were attacking me.
Well, he did say that he was going to shoot the pretty girls in the back of the head, so maybe he did see them as being bullies to him.
Right, they didn't give him his attention, or maybe they made fun of him. Because when you looked at him, the kid just looked disheveled. He didn't look very clean. He didn't have, well, I can't say I knew what his wardrobe looked like, but, he looked kind of slouchy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and his name. Like, come on. Come on. It was like made for this. Ethan Crumbly. Like, this just sounds weird.
Yeah, and I can imagine some high school girls would tear him to shreds.
Yeah, because he was probably mumbly. So they probably called him Crumbly Mumbly.
Crumbly mumbly.
Now you sound like the mean girl. What the fuck?
Were you a mean girl, Nina?
Yes, she was.
I wasn't always a mean girl. I was a mean girl. No.
That's ugly. That's ugly.
Oh, stop it, Christine.
It's gross. It's gross.
Oh, please.
I swear to God, I was like that as a kid too. I never started a fight or picked on.
I didn't start no fights with nobody either. But that doesn't mean that I
was
didn't
the
look at
person-
somebody and go, ooh, they're not put together. Ugh.
I was the person that people came to and told me that somebody was fucking with them. And then I went and did something about it. Because that's how ugly I always thought it was. I was always the bully warrior.
And I was always a defender. And there were plenty of girls that used to get picked on, and I'm like, oh, no. I'm not standing for that shit. I am always fighting for the underdog.
Yeah, I guess that's what made us nurses. Regina, I bet you were like that too. You didn't stand for people being mean to other people. I think that's the nurse in us.
Yeah. You gotta be Captain Sabaho.
Yeah.
All right, that is T-shirt worthy. Captain Save a Ho. I like it. And since, of course, the Oxford High School shooting, there was another one, right? So the biggest difference with the Oxford High School shooting, and I can't remember the one that just happened, but Ethan Crumbly's parents were held responsible, and they are in prison for 15 years. Which, hey, if that makes the difference, then it makes the difference. And then this other kid, do you remember that school shooting?
Yeah, it was not too long ago, but I don't remember exactly the.
Yeah, where the dad, I don't remember there being anything about a mom, so maybe they were divorced, but the dad also had charges put against him. I haven't seen anything more about that in the news, but I haven't really been watching the news.
I gotta say, I totally wholeheartedly agree with that. That means that we as a society are taking a turn to actually doing case by case and not blanketing everything with, if you do X, you get 15 years to life. If you do Y, you get 5 years to life. The case by case offense to school shootings, especially, is to completely assess everything around that child, if it was a child that did it. Because as a society, we need to recognize our ills as society and the projection of that from parents to child and the responsibility that lies within that. Because it all goes back to my whole takes a village to raise children.
Yeah, well, the parents got 15 years, and they won't be eligible for parole until they do at least 10. And Ethan Crumbly is in prison for life. And then after he dies, plus 27 years. So I don't think they're getting out anytime soon.
No, they're not. And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Because I think they were all culpable.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And the
And
other,
it was Appalachia High School in
Thank-
Georgia.
thank you. When was that?
Oh,
It was
geez,
just a
it was.
couple months ago. I
Yeah.
thought.
Yeah, it wasn't that long ago. Have you guys heard anything more about that since the initially it was just the kid, and then the next thing you know, there was the dad coming up on charges, and I was like, sweet, if that's what it takes. Because these kids aren't just getting these guns on their own.
You've already said. That's all I've heard.
Yeah, and your dog. I do want to bring back up, because I did listen to the episode a couple times today, and I just wanted to bring back up the two young ladies that I read their impact statements, the young lady Kylie Osage and Riley Franz. Those impact statements, I wish more people could hear those instead of just all the details of what happened and the horribleness that comes out of it. I wish there was a way for more people to hear from the victims, which I know is probably they're victims. They don't want to talk about it. They're going through their own trauma. But to hear,
They're survivors.
yes,
They're not victims.
thank you. You're correct. Right, but to hear their experience of it, where their life is now. And that's the thing, like, thank the gods that they survived. Sadly, 4 children did not. But, you know, the mental health cost, the PTSD these people are going through. Like Kylie Osage, she can't even hold a job. She's in so much pain. She's had so many spine surgeries from her wound. You know, it's like, it's just such an impact on everybody, not only the loss of lives, but the ones who survive. Their lives are never the same. They're constantly trying to pick up the pieces, but they'll never be the same, ever.
Well, I do know somebody that lives in this community, Oxford, and I remember when this happened, all the posts on social media that he was making and talking about how it was affecting the community. It's sour still. I mean, it's really stinging everybody still, even after, these years. And before we did the story on Malice, I gave him a heads up because I knew it could be something that was going to trigger him, because I know he's a listener.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to have to give him a heads up again, because it's hard to deal with emotionally, especially when you know people in the community that had lost their lives and families that have lost somebody that they loved and their friends and stuff. So I can't put myself in his position because I've never had that happen to me. But I mean, what a sad thing to have to deal with every day, And it goes back to the Bath school bombing, having to see the image of this school where this horrible thing happened, and you have to see it every day. And all those memories that come back and all those feelings of fear. Yeah, it's going to sting.
Well, and to think about the kids that got to go walk back into that school. Like you were saying, the Bath school bombing, that whole community, I mean, we're almost at a 100-year mark, and they're still very tortured from it.
Yeah.
They had to send their kids into that school, right? So
And
they're
how
like,
do you let your child out of your sight after that?
I don't even know.
To put them on a school bus to be somewhere where you can't protect them. I mean, it's insane to think of. Like, I don't know how I would do it.
Yeah, all of a sudden I'll be homeschooling, be a nurse and a teacher. Like, no.
And a security guard.
Yeah. I don't know. I wouldn't want to walk back into that school. And like Christine said in the episode that we did on this was like, I'm giving you my breath. And that was such a great thing that you said, Christine. I'm giving you my breath. I need to make sure that my breath is still breathing when they come home.
Mm-hmm.
She's always got those good little zingers she shoots out there.
Nuggets of wisdom.
Still a little nugget.
They're random.
Well, I know, but they're good. They're that boop. All of a sudden it just comes flying out. I'm like, damn it, that was good.
They're pearls, Christine.
Christine's pearls. Before we sign off, I would just like us to remember the 4 kids who lost their lives on November 30th, 2021 at Oxford High School, along with their families. I don't want to remember the ding-a-ling who did this to them. I want to remember who they were. So as a reminder, we have Hannah St. Juliana. She was just 14 years old. Madison Baldwin, she was 17. Justin Schilling, also 17. And Tate Meyer, who was 16 years old. I know I will, and everyone on this podcast will always remember you. And we're sending out love to family and friends and all the kids in the school. Hope everyone stays healthy and safe. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We hope you guys have a great week. And we will see you guys all back on Malice Monday. Thanks, everyone. Have a great week.
Bye.
Toodaloo.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
See you, everybody.